Welcome back. Turn the engine over. Let it idle a minute and get the heat running. It's just you, me, and the last long stretch of dark. We've covered a lot of miles together, you and I. Night 1 was about the traps you can see coming if you're sharp, the fake breakdowns, the phantom cops, the road rage that begs for a reaction. Night 2 was about the dangers that get inside your bubble, the hitchhiker in the passenger seat, the knock on the glass in a whiteout, the scam at the fuel island. But tonight is Night 3, and I told you this was going to be the hardest one. Because tonight isn't about the bad men in the ditch or the thieves watching the distribution center. Tonight is about the quiet things. The things that happen when the road itself decides to test you. Tonight is about the geography, the elements, the machines, and the most dangerous piece of equipment in the entire cab, your own mind. I want to talk about what happens when the enemy isn't someone else. I want to talk about what happens when the enemy is you. Let's start with the oldest ghost on the highway. Not a spirit, not a spook, a physical, biological fact that has killed more drivers than every cargo thief and road rager combined. Let me tell you about a man named Elias Thorne, and a thing the old-timers call the black dog. Elias Thorne was an owner-operator who loved the hustle more than he loved his own life. You know the type. Always taking the hot loads, always pushing the limits of his logbook, always fueled by black coffee, energy drinks, and the pride of never saying no to a dispatcher. He believed that sleep was a suggestion, and his willpower was absolute. It was a Tuesday night, 3 a.m., in the dead center of Nevada, Route 50. They call it the loneliest road in America, and they aren't joking. It is a straight, hypnotic line of black asphalt, cutting through nothing but sagebrush and starlight. Elias had been running hard for 3 days, catching 2-hour naps over the steering wheel, pushing to make a lucrative drop in Reno. He was doing 70 miles an hour, staring at the dashed white lines disappearing under his hood. Thwack, 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 the rhythm of the road. And then Elias saw it. Right on the hood of his Peterbilt, sitting as clear as day, was a massive black dog. Just sitting there, wind completely ignoring its fur, staring back at him through the windshield with yellow eyes. Now, here is the thing about the black dog. It's not real. It is your brain, starving for sleep, literally shutting down sections of your visual cortex and projecting a waking dream into reality to force you to wake up. It's the final warning system of a dying biological engine. Some drivers see a dog. Some see a brick wall suddenly appear across the interstate. Some see a person step out into the lane. It's hallucination born of exhaustion, but in that split second, your body doesn't know it's a hallucination. Elias reacted the way any driver would if an animal suddenly appeared on the hood of a truck doing 70. He gasped, his heart slammed against his ribs, and his hands jerked the steering wheel hard to the left to shake it off. 40 tons of loaded tractor-trailer does not jerk to the left at 70 miles an hour. The trailer whipped. The tires screamed. The physics of the load took over, shifting the center of gravity. Elias's truck left the asphalt, tore through the rumble strip, chewed up 50 yards of desert scrub, and jackknifed, stopping just feet short of a dry ravine that would have swallowed the rig whole. Elias sat there in the sudden, deafening silence of the desert, his hands welded to the wheel, shaking so hard he couldn't breathe. The dog, of course, was gone. There was never a dog. There was only a man who had pushed his body past the point of human endurance, and a brain that pulled the emergency brake. Here is the lesson, and I want you to hear it clearly, because out here, your pride will kill you faster than a blown steer tire. You cannot outdrive your biology. Elias was a good driver, but he made the fatal mistake of believing he was tougher than fatigue. You aren't. When your eyes start getting heavy, when you realize you don't remember the last 5 miles of road, when the white lines start looking like they're floating, you are already legally impaired. You are driving drunk on exhaustion. The cold voice in your gut isn't just for danger outside the cab. It's for the danger inside, too. When that voice says, "We are done, pull the air brakes," you pull the air brakes. You find a shoulder, an exit, a dirt lot, anywhere safe, and you sleep. A late load is a headache. A jackknife truck is a tragedy. Tell dispatch the weather held you up. Tell them traffic was bad. Tell them whatever you need to tell them, but do not negotiate with the black dog, because the black dog never loses. That's the danger of the mind. Let's talk about the danger of the map. We all run with GPS now. It's a beautiful tool. It tells you the miles, the traffic, the route. But a tool is just a piece of glass and silicon. It doesn't know what the road feels like. It doesn't know that a line on a map might be a paved highway in the summer and a sheet of black ice in the winter. And it doesn't know when somebody has decided to mess with the geography. Let me tell you about Sarah Jenkins and a detour sign that almost cost her everything. Sarah was hauling a load of pharmaceuticals up through the Pacific Northwest. Thick timber country. It was raining that steady, heavy, bone-chilling rain they get up there, and she was running a 2-lane state highway she'd only been on once before. Up ahead, her headlights caught a barricade across her lane. Orange barrels, flashing yellow lights, and a sign, "Road closed ahead. Detour." An arrow pointed off to the right, onto a secondary county road that disappeared into the dark pines. Sarah's GPS recalculated. The little blue line rerouted her down the detour, showing it connecting back to the main highway about 20 miles up. She put her signal on and made the turn. Now, remember the cold, quiet voice. Sarah had it. And about 2 miles down this detour, that voice woke up and started whispering. Here is what her eyes started sending to her brain. The road was paved, but it was narrow, too narrow. The trees were encroaching on the shoulders, their branches scraping the top of her trailer, a terrible sound in the dark. There were no lines painted on the asphalt. And worst of all, there was no other traffic. A state highway gets closed. You expect a line of cars and trucks taking the detour. Sarah was completely, totally alone. She slowed down, 5 miles an hour. She was looking for a place to turn around, but if you know anything about hauling a 3-foot trailer, you know you can't just hang a U-turn on a narrow forest road. You are committed until you find a lot wide enough to swing it. Up ahead, the headlights caught the end of the line. The pavement just stopped. It turned into a washed-out logging trail, deep mud and ruts, completely impassable for a rig. And parked horizontally across that logging trail, blocking it completely, was an old, dark pickup truck. Sarah stopped her rig. She locked her doors. She didn't blow the horn. She sat in the idling, rumbling cab and watched. In her side mirror, in the red glow of her taillights, she saw another set of headlights turn onto the road behind her, about a quarter mile back. They didn't come closer. They just parked, blocking the road from the rear. She was boxed. This is what they call a geographic ambush. The detour sign on the state highway? Fake. Put there by a crew who knew exactly what the GPS algorithms would do when the main road was closed. The algorithm finds the nearest alternate route. The crew knew the alternate route was a dead-end logging road. They just had to put up the fake barricade, wait for a high-value truck to take the bait, follow it in, and box it. Here is exactly what Sarah Jenkins did right, and it is a masterclass in not freezing when the trap snaps shut. First, she did not panic, and she did not get out of the truck. That is what they were waiting for. They wanted her to get down, walk up to the pickup, and ask what was going on. Her cab was a fortress. She stayed in it. Second, she knew her equipment. A truck can't turn around here, but a truck has a reverse gear. Sarah grabbed her CB radio and her phone. No cell service, dead zone. That was part of their plan. 2. She took a deep breath, put the transmission in reverse, kept her eyes glued to her oversized side mirrors, and she started backing up. If you have never backed a 5.3-foot articulated trailer down a pitch-black, winding, tree-lined road in the pouring rain, using nothing but the red glow of your taillights and your own spatial awareness, I cannot adequately describe the skill it takes. It is threading a needle in the dark while looking backward. But Sarah backed up. She moved at a crawl. The car behind her honked, flashed its high beams, trying to blind her, trying to panic her into jacking the trailer into the ditch. If she put the trailer in the ditch, she was stuck permanently. She ignored the flashing lights. She trusted her mirrors. She backed up 10 yards, 20 yards, 100 yards. The car behind her realized she wasn't stopping. It had to throw it in reverse to keep from getting crushed by 40 tons of moving steel. Sarah backed that truck up for 2 solid miles. She forced the trailing car all the way back out to the state highway. The moment the road widened at the intersection, the trailing car peeled off into the rain, fleeing. Sarah swung her cab around, pointed it back the way she came, blew past the fake detour barricade, and didn't stop until she hit a way station 40 miles later to report it to the state troopers. The troopers found the fake signs. They didn't find the crew, but they found the trap, exactly as she described. Here is what you take from Sarah. The map is not the territory. A GPS is a machine that does math. It does not have eyes, and it does not have instinct. If a detour looks wrong, if the road gets too narrow, if the traffic disappears, if that cold voice in your gut says this isn't a truck route, you stop. You pull over safely before you pass the point of no return. You get out your paper atlas. Yes, you need a paper atlas, and you verify. And if you ever realize you are driving into a geographic box, you do not keep going, hoping it gets better. You stop. You lock the doors. And if you have to, you back your way out of hell, 1 inch at a time. Trust your eyes. Trust your gut. Never trust a blind screen. Take a breath. Roll your shoulders. You're doing fine. We've talked about the mind, and we've talked about the map. Now I want to talk about the machine. Your truck is your livelihood, but it is also a mechanical beast made of moving parts, and moving parts break. Hoses blow, belts snap, tires shred. Breaking down is part of the job. But out here, a breakdown makes you vulnerable. It makes you a wounded animal on the Serengeti. And there are vultures out here who make their living entirely off of stranded drivers. This isn't about physical violence. This is about legal extortion. Let me tell you about David Chu and the predatory hook. David was hauling a refrigerated load of produce out of Southern California. High priority, time sensitive. If the refrigeration unit, the reefer, failed, or if the truck was delayed, the whole load would spoil, costing the company tens of thousands of dollars. He was running I-10 through the desert, middle of the afternoon, when his serpentine belt snapped. Complete loss of power steering, alternator stopped charging, engine started getting hot. David muscled the heavy rig onto the shoulder, threw on his four-way flashers, set his triangles out, and climbed back in the cab to call his company's roadside assistance dispatch. He was on hold for maybe 5 minutes. While he was sitting there, a heavy-duty tow truck pulled up in front of his rig, flashing amber lights. The driver hopped out, walked back to David's window, and smiled. He was wearing a high-vis vest, looked completely professional. "See, you blew a belt, driver," the man said. "I can get you hooked up, tow you to a shop about 10 miles up the road. We'll get you fixed up in an hour. Save you sitting out here in the heat waiting for your company's guy who might be 3 hours away." It sounded like a godsend. It sounded like exactly what David needed. But David Chu was a veteran, and his gut started doing the math. First thing, David hadn't called this tow truck. The highway patrol hadn't called them. They just happened to be right there, 5 minutes after he broke down. Second thing, David looked at the side of the tow truck. There was no company name, no USDOT number painted on the door, just a phone number and a blank white door. Third thing, the tow driver was already unspooling his winch cable, walking toward the front of David's truck, ready to hook up before they had even agreed on a price. David rolled his window down 2 inches. "Hold off on the hook, buddy. What's the tow gonna cost?" The man waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. Shop rates. We'll work it out with your company's insurance. Let's just get you off this dangerous shoulder." "Stop," David said, his voice hard. "Do not touch my truck." The tow driver's smile vanished. "Look, buddy, state law says you can't sit on the shoulder." "I'm taking you to the yard. State law says I have time to get my own authorized service," David countered. "Unhook your cable and step away." Here is what David Chu knew that a lot of rookies learn the hard way. This was a predatory tow scam. It's an epidemic in certain parts of the country. Unlicensed, rogue tow trucks monitor CB radios and police scanners. When a truck breaks down, they race to the scene and try to hook the vehicle before the company's authorized repair service arrives. If David had let that man attach that hook to his axle, the game was over. Once a predatory tow truck has your rig on the hook, they own you. They tow you to an unmarked impound lot surrounded by razor wire. And when you ask for the bill, the shop rate tow turns into a $15,000 invoice. Storage fees, hook fees, environmental fees. They hold your multi-million-dollar freight and your truck hostage legally under a mechanic's lien until your company wires them extortion money. If you have a perishable load, they know you're desperate and they squeeze harder. David grabbed his phone and started filming the man. He clearly stated, "I do not consent to this tow. I have authorized service en route. If you touch my vehicle, I am calling the highway patrol to report an attempted vehicle theft." The tow driver glared, swore at him, spat on the dirt, spooled his cable back up, and sped off to find an easier victim. So here is the lesson when the machine breaks. A breakdown is a crisis, but taking a bad offer will turn a crisis into a catastrophe. When you are on the shoulder, you follow your company's protocol to the letter. You do not let a random Good Samaritan tow truck hook your rig unless they were explicitly dispatched by your company or requested by law enforcement. If an unsolicited tow truck shows up and tries to hook you, you lock your doors. You film them. You explicitly deny consent loudly and clearly. And if they hook you anyway, you call 911 and report a grand theft auto in progress. Never trade a delay for a hostage situation. Wait for the authorized truck. Guard your axle the same way you guard your wallet. All right, we are getting near the end of the line. The sun's going to be coming up in an hour or two. I've told you about the mind, the map, and the machine. I want to leave you with one final story. I told you last night that we are the eyes of the highway, and we are the wall that protects the helpless. But out here, we don't just protect the public, we protect each other. When the elements turn against us, when the road becomes a chute of ice and gravity, the only thing keeping us alive is the brotherhood of the long white line. Let me tell you about a downgrade, a sheet of ice, and a man named Marcus Vance. If you haul out west, you know the names that make drivers go quiet. Donner Pass, Vale Pass, Cabbage Hill. Cabbage Hill is in Oregon, Interstate 84. It is a 6% downgrade that lasts for 6 miles, with double hairpin turns. In the summer, it will burn your brakes to ash if you aren't careful. In the winter, covered in black ice, it is a meat grinder. Marcus Vance was an old-school log hauler. He knew mountains better than he knew his own living room. He was heading down Cabbage Hill on a Tuesday night in January. The temperature had plummeted, and the rain had turned to freezing rain. The asphalt was a solid sheet of black ice. Marcus was doing it right. He was doing 20 miles an hour. He was in a low gear. He had his engine brake, the Jake brake, set to low, letting the compression of the engine hold the truck back so he didn't have to touch his service brakes. You touch your air brakes on ice on a downgrade, your wheels lock up, your trailer slides faster than your cab, and you fold the truck in half. Jackknife. Game over. Marcus was creeping down the mountain, steady, focused. Then his nose caught it. The bitter, acrid smell of burning asbestos and fried metal. Somebody ahead of him was burning their brakes. Marcus grabbed the CB. Northbound on Cabbage, whoever is riding their brakes, you need to let off right now. You're gonna glaze your pads and lose everything. Talk to me. Static. Then, a voice came back. Young, shaking, pure, unfiltered panic. I can't stop. I'm gaining speed. I'm in too high a gear. I can't downshift. The ice is too bad. If I let off the brakes, I'm gonna fly off the mountain. It was a rookie. He'd gone into the descent in the wrong gear, panicked when the truck sped up, and now he was standing on his brake pedal. His brakes were overheating. In about 60 seconds, they would catch fire, fade to zero friction, and he would become an 80,000-pound missile rocketing down a sheet of ice into the hairpin turns below. Marcus Vance didn't hesitate. "Kid, listen to me." Marcus barked into the mic, his voice cutting through the panic like a knife. "This is the old Pete behind you. You are going to live today, but you have to do exactly what I say right now. Take your foot off the brake pedal." "I can't." "Take it off. Let the truck roll. Turn your Jake brake on full. I am directly behind you. I am coming up on your bumper." Marcus Vance intentionally let off his own engine brake. He gained speed on the ice, catching up to the runaway rookie ahead of him in the dark. "I'm on your DOT bumper, kid," Marcus said calmly. "I am going to act as your anchor. When I tell you, I want you to ease off your brake pedal completely and let my truck hold your weight. Ready? 3, 2, 1, off the brakes." The rookie let off. Marcus felt the massive thud as the rookie's trailer leaned into the front of Marcus's rig. Now, Marcus Vance was using the engine compression of his own truck to slow the combined weight of 2 loaded tractor-trailers on a 6% downgrade covered in ice. It was an agonizing, terrifying balancing act. If Marcus lost traction, they both went off the cliff. "All right, kid," Marcus said, his voice smooth as glass, sweat pouring down his face. "Your brakes are cooling. We're doing 25. We are going to ride this together all the way down to the runaway ramp at mile marker 220. Do not touch your wheel. Keep it straight. I got you. I got you. For 4 miles, they rode down that mountain like that. Tandem. One stranger risking his own life and his own rig to anchor a terrified kid who had made a mistake. And they weren't alone. Marcus got on the CB and told the trucks behind him what was happening. And a dozen rigs, veterans and rookies alike, formed a blockade behind them, rolling side by side down the 2 lanes, completely blocking all traffic, ensuring no four-wheeler or passing truck could get around them and cause a pileup. They created an empty, safe chute for Marcus and the kid all the way to the bottom. They reached the flat at the bottom of Cabbage Hill. The kid's brakes had cooled enough to function. He pulled onto the wide shoulder, his tires smoking, his cab shaking. Marcus rolled past him, gave 2 blasts of the air horn, and kept going. Didn't stop for a thank you. Didn't ask for a medal. It's just what we do. So this is it. This is the final lesson, the one that ties every single thing I've told you over these 3 nights into one knot. The road is hard. It is unforgiving. There are men who will try to rob you, scams that will try to trap you, weather that will try to kill you, and a mind that will try to trick you. But you are not a victim waiting to happen. You are a professional. You trust that cold voice in your gut, because it is the accumulated wisdom of 1,000,000 miles of survival. You lock your doors. You guard your space. You stay in the light. You verify the map. You respect the machine. You pull the air brakes when the black dog howls. And above all, you remember the brotherhood. You are a member of a community of 100,000 watching eyes, rolling across the dark spine of a continent. When the trap is sprung, we throw the net. When the wreck happens, we build the wall. When the rookie slips, we become the anchor. We survive the dark because we carry the light with us. It's your turn now. The keys are yours. The logbook is yours. The miles are yours. Take a deep breath. Put it in gear. Drive safe out there, my friend. Stay sharp. Be the eyes. Be the wall. And I'll see you on down the road. Night 5. The edge of the map. Welcome back. I see you didn't run. I see you're still sitting there, watching the dashed white lines get swallowed up by the darkness under our bumper. You've got grit. I'll give you that. After the traps, the whiteouts, the glitches in the mind, and the predators, most people would have handed back the keys and found a nice, quiet job sitting at a desk under fluorescent lights. But you're still here. You've got the diesel in your blood now. We are in the deepest part of the night. The witching hour is gone. This is the dead stretch 3:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. This is when the world is completely asleep, the radio goes quiet, and the only thing keeping you tethered to the earth is the vibration of the steering wheel in your hands. Tonight, I'm not going to talk about the obvious dangers. Tonight, we go to the edge of the map. I'm going to tell you about the setups that look like the law, the silent poison that rides on your 5th wheel, the coordinated attacks that defy logic, and the ultimate test of what it means to wear the title of a long-haul driver. Let's get right into it. Keep your eyes peeled. Let me tell you about Elena Rios and the checkpoint that wasn't on any map. The fake scales. There's a deep, primal respect every driver has for the Department of Transportation. When you see the way station signs flashing "All commercial vehicles must enter," your stomach tightens. You check your logbook, you check your gauges, you pray your tandem axles are balanced right, and you pull in. It's the law. You don't argue with the dot. And organized crime knows that. They know that a trucker will stop for flashing amber and blue lights and a uniform. Elena Rios was running a load of high-end consumer electronics, smartphones, laptops, millions of dollars in a sealed 53-foot box. She was driving US Route 83 down in South Texas, moving parallel to the border. It's desolate country. Heat mirages during the day, pitch black at night, mesquite bushes, dust, and nothing else. It was 2 a.m. Elena came over a shallow rise and saw the setup. Portable floodlights illuminating the shoulder. Orange traffic barrels forcing the right lane into a dirt pull-off. 2 dark SUVs parked at angles, their light bars flashing alternating red and blue, and a temporary, reflective sign propped up on the asphalt. Commercial vehicle inspection ahead. Prepare to stop. Elena's foot came off the accelerator. The engine brake grumbled. She flipped her turn signal on and guided her rig onto the dirt shoulder, coming to a halt in the blinding glare of the floodlights. She rolled her window down, grabbed her binder with her bill of lading, her logbook, and her CDL, waiting for the officer to walk up. But as she sat there, idling in the dust, the cold, ancient voice in her gut woke up, and it started screaming. Elena was sharp. She didn't just look, she observed. Here is what the lights revealed to her. First, the SUVs. They were dark, yes, and they had light bars, but there were no state seals on the doors. No Texas Highway Patrol. No dot markings. Just black paint. Second, the officers. Two men walked out of the glare toward her cab. They were wearing dark, tactical gear and high-visibility vests. But Elena looked down. One of them was wearing worn-out sneakers, the other was wearing scuffed cowboy boots. State troopers and dot inspectors were issued polished black boots. Always. Third, the positioning. A real dot stop wants you to pull through so they can weigh your axles or check your brakes. These men had placed the barrels in a way that forced her truck nose first into a cluster of heavy mesquite trees. If she wanted to leave, she would have to back up. She was pinned. The man in the sneakers stepped up to her driver's side door. He didn't ask for her logbook. He didn't ask for her CDL. He tapped hard on the fiberglass door and said, "Cut the engine, driver. Step down, out of the cab. We need to inspect the cargo." A real dot officer asks for paperwork first. They rarely tell you to exit the cab on a dark highway unless you are being placed under arrest. And they absolutely do not ask to open a sealed, bonded load on the side of a dirt road without severe probable cause. Elena Rios did exactly what you must do when the law looks wrong. She did not cut the engine. She rolled her window up until there was only a 1-inch gap. "I need to see a badge and a commission card," Elena said, her voice projecting loud over the diesel rumble. The man's eyes narrowed. He put his hand on his hip, resting it right where a holster would be. "I said step out of the damn truck." "Now, and I said I want a badge number," Elena shot back. She reached up with her left hand and locked the air valve on her trailer brakes, meaning the trailer was free to roll but kept her foot hard on the tractor brakes. Her right hand went to the gear shift. She dropped it into drive. The second man, the one in the boots, realized she was gearing up. He yelled something in Spanish, rushed forward, and jumped onto the fuel tank steps, grabbing the handle of her door, pulling hard. It was locked. He drew a heavy steel flashlight and reared back to smash the driver's side window. Elena didn't wait. She didn't back up. She stood on the accelerator and cranked the steering wheel hard to the left. 40 tons of Peterbilt surged forward. The heavy steel cattle guard on her front bumper caught the rear quarter panel of one of the black SUVs, crumpling it like a tin can and shoving the 2-ton vehicle out of the way with the horrific screech of tearing metal. The man on her steps was thrown off into the dust. Elena drove right over the orange traffic barrels, plunging her truck back onto the asphalt of US 83, leaving the fake checkpoint in a cloud of diesel smoke and chaos. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, screaming to the dispatcher that she had just rammed an unmarked vehicle at a fake checkpoint and was fleeing northbound. She stayed on the line for 45 minutes until 2 marked, verified Texas state troopers intercepted her and escorted her to a weigh station. The police went back to the site. The SUVs were gone. The barrels were gone. The only thing left was the shattered taillight glass from the vehicle Elena had rammed. It was a cartel hijacking crew. They knew what was in her trailer, and they used the ultimate disguise authority to make her stop. Here's your takeaway, and I want it burned into your brain. Authority is earned, and it must be verifiable. If you are pulled over in a dark, isolated area by an unmarked car, or if a checkpoint looks ragged, unprofessional, or traps your vehicle, your cab is your castle. Keep it locked, keep it in gear, crack the window an inch, demand identification. If they are real cops, they will be annoyed, but they will show you a badge. If they are fake, they will escalate immediately. And if they escalate, if they try to breach your cab in the dark, you use the mass of your vehicle to survive. You call 911, you tell dispatch, you fear for your life and are driving to a lit, populated area, and you get the hell out of there. A truck can be replaced. The cargo is insured. You only get one life. Don't hand it over to a ghost in a high-vis vest. The silent passenger. Let's shift gears. I want to talk about the cargo again, but not the kind that sloshes, and not the kind that people want to steal. I want to talk about the kind of cargo that wants to kill everything it touches. If you get your hazmat endorsement, you become part of an elite club. You carry the lifeblood and the poison of the modern world. Explosives, corrosives, flammable liquids, radioactive materials. You get paid more, but the cost is carrying a bomb strapped to your back. And the scariest hazmat loads aren't the explosives. Explosives are quick. The scariest loads are Class 2 and Class 6, poisonous gases and toxic liquids. Because if something goes wrong, you won't hear a bang. You will just slowly go to sleep and never wake up. Let me tell you about Vince Doc Holliday and the leak in the valley. Doc was a veteran, 25 years hauling chemicals. He was pulling a pressurized tanker full of anhydrous ammonia. It's used for fertilizer, but in its pure, concentrated form, it is a nightmare. It aggressively seeks out moisture. If it touches your skin, it causes severe chemical burns. If you inhale it, it binds with the moisture in your lungs and drowns you from the inside out in your own fluids. Doc was driving through a winding, two-lane valley road in the Appalachian Mountains. Deep gorges, small towns nestled in the dips, zero wind. The air was stagnant. He was an hour away from the delivery site when he noticed a slight drop in the air pressure on his trailer lines. Not enough to lock the brakes, just a subtle dip. A minute later, he smelled it. Ammonia has a sharp, suffocating odor. You've smelled it in cleaning products. But inside the cab of a truck, even a trace amount is a klaxon horn. Doc immediately checked his mirrors. In the red glow of his marker lights, he saw it. A faint, white, vaporous cloud trailing from the rear discharge valve of his tanker, lingering low to the asphalt. A valve seal had failed. He was leaking pure anhydrous ammonia. Now, the protocol for a hazmat leak is strict. Stop the vehicle, isolate the area, call the authorities, evacuate upwind. Doc started to slow down to pull onto the shoulder, but as he looked out his windshield, he saw the glow of streetlights ahead. He was descending into a valley town, a little community of maybe 3,000 people, asleep in their beds. Doc knew the science. Anhydrous ammonia vapor is heavier than air. In a windless valley, that toxic cloud wouldn't dissipate, it would sink. It would pool in the lowest points, the streets, the basements, the bedrooms, creeping through window cracks and air conditioners. If he stopped his truck on the edge of that town, the leaking gas would suffocate hundreds of people in their sleep. The cold voice in his gut didn't say stop. It said run. He couldn't go forward into the town. He couldn't stop. He had to turn around and find high ground, away from population centers. Doc slammed the brakes, bringing the rig to a screeching halt in the middle of the empty two-lane road. He threw it into reverse, backed the trailer into a tight logging access road, jackknifed it perfectly, and swung the cab around, pointing the truck back up the mountain grade he had just come down. He keyed his CB radio, switching to Channel 9, the emergency channel. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is a commercial vehicle, eastbound Route 40. I have a Class 2 hazmat leak, anhydrous ammonia. I am turning away from population, heading for the high ridge. Get hazmat crews to my location immediately. He dropped the hammer and started climbing the mountain. But here was the terrifying reality. The leak was at the back of his trailer. He was driving forward. The vapor cloud was trailing behind him. But when you drive a semi-truck, the aerodynamics create a vacuum behind the cab, pulling air and anything in it forward into the gap between the tractor and the trailer. The gas was creeping into the cab. Doc's eyes started to water uncontrollably. His throat tightened, feeling like he was inhaling broken glass. He rolled the windows up tight, shut off the climate control, and tied a spare t-shirt around his face, breathing through the fabric. But it wasn't enough. The concentration was getting thicker. His vision began to blur. His hands grew numb on the wheel. He was suffocating while driving a loaded bomb up a mountain grade. Pull over, his exhausted brain begged. Just pull over and run into the woods. If I stop here, the gas rolls back down into the valley, Doc told himself. Keep climbing. He drove blind, his eyes squeezed shut against the burning pain, opening them for half a second at a time just to keep the rig out of the ditch. He drove for 4 agonizing miles, climbing higher and higher into the remote, uninhabited peaks of the Appalachians. Finally, he reached a scenic overlook. High altitude, exposed to the crosswinds. He pulled the rig into the massive gravel lot, threw the parking brakes, and kicked the door open. Doc tumbled out of the cab, crawling on his hands and knees upwind, away from the trailer, gasping for clean air, vomiting, his lungs screaming. He laid in the gravel for 30 minutes until the local fire department and a hazmat team arrived in full level A chemical suits. They capped the valve and neutralized the spill. The crosswinds on the peak dispersed the remaining vapor harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. Doc spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from chemical burns in his lungs, but nobody in that valley town ever woke up coughing. Most of them never even knew a man almost died in his cab to keep a toxic cloud out of their children's bedrooms. This is the gravity of the job. If you pull a hazmat placard, you aren't just a driver. You are the guardian of your cargo. You have to know the science of what you are hauling. You have to know the topography of the land. And sometimes, you have to be willing to endure absolute hell to make sure the mistakes of the machine don't cost the lives of the innocent. Respect the placard, because the cargo has no conscience. The box, let's bring it back to the bad men. But let's talk about the professionals. I told you about the brake checker, the angry guy in a pickup who wants diet. That's amateur hour. That's emotion. The most dangerous attacks on the highway aren't emotional. They are calculated, coordinated, and executed with military precision. They don't want a fight. They want your truck to stop so they can board it, hijack it, and steal the load. Let me tell you about Big Mac McAllister and the geometry of the box. Mac was hauling pharmaceutical precursors, raw materials used to manufacture painkillers, extremely high value on the black market. He was running I-95 through a heavily congested urban corridor at 11 p.m. Traffic was moving, but it was dense. Concrete barriers on both sides, 4 lanes of vehicles. Mac was in the second lane from the right, doing 60 miles an hour. A black Honda Civic merged onto the highway and slid into the lane directly in front of him. Mac didn't think much of it. He maintained his following distance. A minute later, a dark gray Dodge Charger pulled up on his left side, matching his speed exactly. The Charger stayed right at Mac's driver's side door. 10 seconds after that, a white Ford Explorer pulled up on his right side, matching his speed. And then, Mac looked in his rearview mirror. A heavy-duty tow truck, unmarked, was riding his bumper, less than 5 feet off his dot bar. Front, left, right, back. He was boxed. Mac's guard didn't just whisper, it dropped like a stone. This was a classic swoop and squat formation, but escalated for a hijacking. The vehicles on the left and right prevent the truck from changing lanes. The vehicle in the rear prevents the truck from slowing down safely, and the vehicle in the front dictates the speed. The black Honda in front of him tapped its brakes. Mac let off the accelerator. His speed dropped to 55. The Charger and the Explorer dropped to 55. The tow truck stayed glued to his rear. The Honda tapped its brakes again. 50, 45, 40. They were bleeding his momentum. They were going to force him to a dead stop in the middle of a 4-lane interstate. And once the truck was stopped, armed men would jump from the surrounding vehicles, breach the cab, and take the rig. Mac grabbed the CB. Breaker 19. I am northbound 95. Being boxed by 4 vehicles. Attempted hijacking in progress. Somebody call the bears. But there was no time to wait for the police. The Honda dropped to 30 miles an hour. They were approaching an overpass, a dark, unlit section of the highway with no cameras. That was their drop zone. Mac McAllister was a big man, and he drove a big truck, a long-nose Kenworth W900 with a custom steel bumper. He weighed 80,000 pounds. The combined weight of the 3 passenger cars boxing him was maybe 12,000 pounds. He remembered the golden rule. A rolling truck is a fortress. A stopped truck is a tomb. He could not let them stop him, but he also couldn't just plow over the Honda in front of him. If he crushed a passenger car and killed someone, he'd go to prison, even in self-defense. The law is messy. So Mac used physics. He used the geometry of the box against them. The weakest link in the box was the white Ford Explorer on his right. It was riding his steer tire, trying to keep him from moving into the slow lane. Mac didn't slam the brakes. He didn't drop the hammer. He gripped the heavy steering wheel, checked his mirror, and gently, firmly, began to drift into the right lane. He didn't swerve. He just leaned the massive weight of the Kenworth's front right steer tire into the side of the Explorer. SKRRRRH. Steel ground against steel. The Explorer's driver panicked. When 80,000 pounds of truck leans into your door, your instinct is to get away. The Explorer jerked its steering wheel to the right, bouncing hard off the concrete jersey barrier on the shoulder, sparks flying, and slammed the brakes, falling behind. The right side of the box was open. Mac immediately swung the heavy rig hard into the right lane, clearing the Honda in front of him. The Honda, realizing the prey was escaping, tried to accelerate to cut him off again, but Mac was already back on the throttle. The massive diesel engine roared, spooling the turbo, and the Kenworth surged forward. The Dodge Charger on the left tried to swerve into Mac's trailer to pit him. But a 4,000-pound car cannot pit a fully loaded 5.3-foot trailer. The Charger bounced off the heavy rubber tandem tires of the trailer, shattering its own headlight, and spun out across the median. Mac broke the box. He didn't stop. He pushed the Kenworth up to 80 miles an hour, his air horn blaring a continuous, deafening roar to warn every car on the interstate to get out of the way. He drove like a bat out of hell for 10 solid miles until he saw the blue lights of state troopers racing up the southbound side, responding to the CB calls. He pulled into a lit way station, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't pull the air brake valve for a full minute. Here is what you need to understand about the highway. When predators hunt, they rely on you obeying the rules of civil society. They rely on you braking when someone cuts you off. They rely on your fear of scratching a fender. When you realize you are being hunted, the rules change. You are the apex predator of the asphalt. You are 80,000 pounds of kinetic energy. If a crew tries to box you, you do not let them bleed your speed to zero. You find the weakest point in the trap, you apply the immense weight of your machine, and you break the box. You lean into them, you push them into the shoulder, you do whatever it takes to keep your wheels turning. A scratched bumper is paperwork. A stopped truck is a tragedy. Keep rolling. The final ride. Take a deep breath. We are almost there. Look out the passenger window. The sky is turning from pitch black to that deep, bruised purple. Dawn is coming. I've told you about the horrors, the traps, and the bad men. But I want to end this night, and this whole long journey, with a story about why we stay out here. Because if it was all just thieves, ghosts, and wrecks, nobody would drive a truck. We stay out here because of the honor of the thing. We stay out here because, when the world breaks down, when the snow flies and the lights go out, we are the only ones left moving. Let me tell you about Arthur Pendleton, the old man, the mountain, and the final ride. Arthur was 71 years old. He had been driving a truck for 48 years, 4 million safe miles. He had seen the industry change from the wild west of paper logs and CB outlaws to the modern era of electronic monitors and governed engines. He was a dinosaur, and this was his very last week. On Friday, he was handing in his keys, retiring, and going home to his wife in Georgia. He was running a flatbed load of lumber across Interstate 80 Inches, Wyoming, winter, late February. If you know I-80 Inches, Wyoming, you know it is the roof of the highway system. It is high plateau, swept by winds so violent they routinely blow fully loaded tractor-trailers over onto their sides. Arthur heard the weather warnings on the radio. A massive ground blizzard was sweeping in. The highway patrol was shutting the gates, closing the interstate in sections. Arthur did the smart thing, the thing a 4-million-mile veteran does. He didn't push it. He pulled into a massive truck stop in Rawlins, Wyoming, backed his rig into a spot, set his brakes, and went into the diner to drink coffee and wait out the storm. Within an hour, the blizzard hit. It wasn't just snow. It was a whiteout driven by 60-mile-an-hour winds. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero. The interstate was completely impassable. Arthur was sitting in a booth, listening to the CB chatter of other stranded drivers, when a weak, broken transmission came through the static on Channel 19. "Help! Anybody out there, please!" Arthur keyed his mic. "This is Arthur. I got my ears on. Speak up, driver." The voice wasn't a truck driver. It was a civilian. "My name is Mark. I'm in an RV with my wife and 2 kids. We tried to beat the storm. We slid off the road. I don't know where we are. The engine died. The heater is gone. We're freezing. Please." Arthur's blood ran cold. An RV is a fiberglass shell. In negative 20-degree weather, with 60-mile-an-hour winds, a family stuck in a dead vehicle would freeze to death in a matter of hours. "Mark, what was the last mile marker you saw?" Arthur asked, his voice steady, professional. "Maybe 210. We were heading east. We're down in a ditch. The snow is drifting over the windows. Nobody can see us. Mile marker 210 was about 8 miles east of the truck stop. Arthur looked around the diner. The state troopers were stranded. The tow trucks weren't running. The plows had been pulled off the road because visibility was absolute zero. The authorities were not coming. Arthur stood up. He buttoned his heavy flannel coat, put on his insulated gloves, and pulled his cap down low. He walked out into the howling, blinding storm. He didn't go to his trailer. He went to his tractor. He dropped the landing gear of his flatbed trailer, pulled the fifth wheel pin, unhooked the air lines, and pulled his tractor out from under the load. He was bobtailing, just the cab. Now, listen to me. Driving a bobtail tractor in the snow is the most dangerous driving you can do. A semi-truck is designed to have weight over the rear drive axles to gain traction. Without a trailer, the rear wheels are incredibly light. They spin, they fishtail, they slide. A bobtail in a blizzard is a hockey puck on ice. Arthur Pendleton didn't care. He threw heavy iron chains over his drive tires in the freezing wind. His bare hands bleeding from the cold metal, he climbed into the cab, fired the massive diesel engine, and drove out of the truck stop, past the barricades, and onto the closed, terrifyingly empty expanse of Interstate 80. It was like driving into a wall of milk. He couldn't see the hood of his own truck. He drove by feel. The rumble strips on the shoulder, vibrating his tires when he drifted too far right. The soft crunch of the median snow warning him when he drifted too far left. He crept along at 10 miles an hour. Every gust of wind threatened to blow the light tractor off the road. "Mark, you still there?" Arthur called on the radio. "Cold," came the whisper. "Kids are crying. So cold." "I'm coming, son. Look for my amber lights." Arthur drove for an hour to cover 8 miles. When he calculated he was near mile marker 210, he started blasting his air horn. "Be woom! Be woom!" He rolled down his passenger window, letting the freezing blizzard blast into his cab, and listened. Through the howling wind, he heard the faint beep of a car horn. Arthur stopped the rig. He grabbed a heavy tow strap, a flashlight, and stepped out into the storm. The wind literally knocked him to his knees. He crawled through the knee-deep snow, moving toward the sound of the horn, until his flashlight caught the reflective striping of the buried RV in the ditch. He dug out the door. Inside, the family was huddled under thin blankets, their lips blue, shaking violently. "Get your coats!" Arthur barked over the wind. "You're coming with me." "We can't walk," the father stammered. "You don't have to walk far," Arthur said. He hooked the heavy tow strap to the front axle of the RV, dragged the other end up the embankment, and hooked it to the massive steel pintle hitch on the back of his bobtail tractor. Arthur climbed back into his cab. He engaged the differential lock, locking all 4 drive tires together. He put the transmission in the lowest possible gear. He slowly let the clutch out. The 500 horsepower diesel roared. The iron chains chewed into the ice, and the heavy tractor groaned against the dead weight of the RV. Slowly, agonizingly, Arthur dragged the RV up out of the ditch and onto the snow-packed shoulder of the interstate. He didn't unhook. He kept the RV on the tether, dragging it like a sled behind his tractor, and drove the 8 miles back to the Rawlins truck stop in reverse of the nightmare he had just braved. He pulled the whole rig right up to the front doors of the diner. He carried the 2 frozen kids inside himself, laying them by the massive stone fireplace. The paramedics arrived 3 hours later, when the storm finally broke. The family survived. Arthur Pendleton didn't stay for the local news crews. He went out to his truck, hooked back up to his flatbed trailer, did his pre-trip inspection, and drove to Georgia. He handed his keys to the terminal manager, clocked out, and walked away. That is the legend of Arthur Pendleton. And that is the answer to the whole damn thing. Why do we put up with the danger? Why do we endure the isolation, the bad food, the crazy four-wheelers, the thieves, and the ghosts? Because out here, when the chips are down, we are the cavalry. We are the men and women who hold the line between civilization and the wild. A truck driver is a blue-collar knight in a steel chariot. When someone is broken down in the dark, when a family is freezing in a ditch, when the hospitals need medicine and the cities need food, they don't call politicians. They don't call Wall Street. They call us. And we gear up, we lock our doors, we trust our gut, and we drive into the storm. Look out the window, driver. The sun is coming up. The sky is turning orange, and the asphalt is turning gray. The shadows are melting away. We made it through the night. I've taught you everything I know. The mind, the map, the machine, the monsters, and the honor. You carry it all with you now. You are the keeper of the stories. Someday, you'll be the veteran sitting in the diner, passing these lessons down to some greenhorn who thinks he knows it all. You keep them safe. You keep the brotherhood alive. It's daylight now. My shift is over. The rest of this run is on you. Keep your doors locked. Trust that cold voice in your gut. Guard your brothers. Be the wall. Be the light. Drive safe out there, friend. I'll see you on down the road. Well, look who it is. Pull up a stool. Wipe the grease off that laminated menu and sit down. I saw your rig parked out in the lot when I pulled in. You backed it into that tight spot perfectly. You're holding the lines well. I know what I told you last time. I told you my shift was over. I told you the sun was up, the night was done, and that the rest of the run was on you. And that was true. The night is done. The vampires are back in their coffins. The prowlers are asleep. But I saw the way you walked into this diner. You've got that stiffness in your shoulders. That 1,000-yard stare over your coffee cup. You've realized something out there on the interstate today, haven't you? You realize that just because the sun is shining, the road doesn't suddenly become your friend. Daylight doesn't kill the danger. It just puts it in a different uniform. When the sun is up, you let your guard down. You see crowds, you see traffic, you see normal people going about their normal lives, and that cold voice in your gut decides it's safe to take a nap. And that is exactly when the daytime predators strike. They don't hide in the shadows. They hide in plain sight. They hide behind clipboards, behind rush hour traffic, and behind the blinding glare of the noon sun. Drink your coffee. Let me tell you about a man named Silas Reed. And the receiver who didn't exist, the clipboard ghost. Cargo theft at night is a violent, terrifying thing. It's unmarked SUVs and guns and roadblocks. But cargo theft in the daylight, it's a polite conversation and a piece of paper. It is called strategic theft, and it is the smoothest, most infuriating scam on the asphalt. Silas Reed was an old-school driver hauling a flatbed loaded with 40,000 pounds of high-grade copper wire. If you know anything about scrap and metals, you know copper is basically untraceable gold. He was delivering to a massive industrial park outside of Chicago. It was 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was shining. Delivery trucks were everywhere. Forklifts were beeping. Total, normal, organized chaos. Silas pulled his rig down the long access road leading to the receiver's gate. There were 5 trucks idling in line ahead of him, waiting to get into the yard. While he was sitting there, a guy walked out of the facility gates and walked down the line of trucks. The guy looked the part completely. He was wearing a hard hat, a high-visibility safety vest, steel-toed boots, and he was carrying a clipboard with a radio clipped to his belt. The guy walked right up to Silas's window and smiled. "You read with the copper load?" the guy asked, checking his clipboard. "That's me," Silas said. "Listen, buddy, we are jammed up to the fences in Warehouse 4 today," the guy said, wiping sweat off his forehead like a man who'd been working hard all shift. "Our forklifts are backed up for 3 hours, but my logistics manager wants this copper unloaded now. So here's what we're doing. You see that overflow dirt lot right across the street? The one with the chain link fence?" Silas looked. There was a big, empty, fenced-in lot directly across from the main facility. "Yeah, I see it," Silas said. "Pull your rig over there. Drop the trailer in the lot. We've got a yard dog coming to shuttle it in once we clear a dock. I'll sign your bill of lading right now so you can get paid and get back on the road instead of sitting here burning your hours." Now, to a tired driver, this sounds like a miracle. You get to drop the load, skip the 3-hour line, get your paperwork signed, and leave. The guy had the right vocabulary. He had the right uniform. He was standing right outside the company gates in broad daylight. Silas pulled his truck across the street. He dropped the trailer's landing gear, unhooked the airlines, and pulled his tractor out. The guy in the hard hat signed the bill of lading with a flourish, handed Silas the pink copy, smiled, and said, "Drive safe, driver." Silas drove away, feeling like he'd just won the lottery. 3 hours later, Silas's phone rang. It was his dispatcher. "Silas, where the hell are you?" The receiver just called. "They said you never checked in at the guard shack, and they need that copper." Silas felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "What are you talking about?" "I dropped the trailer in their overflow lot across the street. The yard manager signed my BOL." "Silas," the dispatcher said, his voice going dead flat, They don't own a lot across the street. Silas whipped his truck around and drove an hour back to the industrial park. He pulled up to the chain link fence across the street. The lot was completely empty. His trailer was gone. The 40,000 pounds of copper was gone. The guy with the hard hat and the clipboard was gone. It was a daylight hijacking, executed with absolutely zero violence. The crew knew exactly what Silas was hauling. They parked a stolen tractor around the corner. The guy in the hard hat waited for Silas to arrive, played the part of the stressed-out warehouse worker, and convinced Silas to legally hand over the cargo. The second Silas drove his cab out of sight, the crew's tractor backed under Silas's dropped trailer, hooked up, and drove off with $500,000 in copper. And because Silas had voluntarily dropped the trailer outside the secured facility, the insurance claim became a nightmare. Here is what you take away from Silas's terrible day. Daylight creates a false sense of security. A high-vis vest and a clipboard do not equal authority. If you are delivering a load, you do not talk to the guy on the street. You do not drop a trailer outside the physical gates of the facility. You drive up to the guard shack, you hand your paperwork through the glass to the person sitting at the desk, and you verify every single change in plans. If someone tells you to divert, you roll your window up, lock your doors, and call your dispatcher. You say, "I have a man out here telling me to drop the load in an alternate lot." Confirm with the receiver. 9 times out of 10, the receiver won't know who the hell that man is. Trust the building. Trust your dispatcher. Never trust a ghost with a clipboard. The physics of the swarm. Let's talk about traffic. At night, your enemy is isolation. During the day, your enemy is the crowd. When you are driving 80,000 pounds of steel through a major metropolitan area, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago, during rush hour, you are surrounded by thousands of four-wheelers. And here is the brutal truth about four-wheelers. They do not understand what your truck is. They think you are just a really big, slow car. They do not understand that it takes you the length of 2 football fields to stop. They do not understand your blind spots. And some of them understand it perfectly, and they use it as a weapon. Let me tell you about Maya Lin and the daytime swoop and squat. I told you before about the hijacking box. But this wasn't a hijacking. This was pure, predatory insurance fraud. Maya was running Interstate 285, the perimeter around Atlanta. It was 3 p.m., 5 lanes of traffic moving at a chaotic, aggressive 65 miles an hour. Maya was in the second lane from the right, keeping a massive following distance between her Peterbilt and the minivan in front of her. Out of nowhere, a beat-up silver Nissan Altima shot over from the far left lane, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic, and swooped directly into the gap between Maya's truck and the minivan. The Nissan was maybe 10 feet off Maya's front bumper, and the second the Nissan was centered in her lane, the driver slammed on the brakes. Hard, total, panic-stop lockup. Smoke poured from the Nissan's tires. There was no traffic stopped in front of the Nissan. There was no debris in the road. It was a deliberate, targeted brake check. Now, I want you to freeze that moment in your mind. Imagine you are Maya. You are doing 65. A car just parked itself 10 feet in front of your grille. You have exactly 1.5 seconds to make a decision. Instinct human, compassionate, deeply ingrained instinct screams at you to swerve. You want to jerk the steering wheel into the left or right lane to avoid crushing the car in front of you. But Maya Lin was a professional, and she understood the brutal physics of her machine. If Maya swerved an 80,000-pound top-heavy trailer at 65 miles an hour, the trailer would whip. It would roll over. It would crush the cars in the lanes next to her. It would cause a 10-car pileup, and people, innocent people, who had nothing to do with the scam would die. You cannot save the idiot in front of you by killing the innocent people beside you. Maya did not swerve. She gripped the steering wheel with bone-crushing force, held it dead straight, and she stood with both feet on her brake pedal. Crunch! The massive steel bumper of the Peterbilt hit the rear of the Nissan like a sledgehammer hitting a soda can. The impact crumpled the trunk of the car all the way into the back seat, shattering glass and sending the Nissan skidding forward for 50 yards before both vehicles ground to a halt in a cloud of dust and burnt rubber. Traffic stopped. Horns blared. Maya sat in her cab, her heart hammering against her ribs, her hands shaking. Down on the asphalt, the 4 doors of the Nissan flew open. 4 people stumbled out of the car, and immediately, the theater began. All four of them collapsed onto the pavement, clutching their necks, screaming in agony, rolling around and wailing about their spines. This was the play. They cut off a commercial truck, force a rear-end collision, and claim massive whiplash and spinal injuries. Commercial trucking companies carry million-dollar insurance policies. The fraudsters know that a rear-end collision is almost always blamed on the driver in the back for following too closely. They wanted a six-figure settlement. The police arrived. The ambulances arrived. The driver of the Nissan pointed up at Maya's cab and started screaming to the officer. She wasn't paying attention. She rammed us. We were just slowing down for traffic and she hit us. The police officer walked up to Maya's door, looking grim. In the eyes of the law, rear-ending someone is an uphill battle to defend. Maya rolled down her window. She was completely calm. "Officer," Maya said, pointing to a small black square mounted on the inside of her windshield. "I have a high-definition, forward-facing dashcam with a GPS speed overlay. It recorded everything." The officer's eyebrows went up. He climbed up on her step and watched the playback on the little screen. He saw the wide-open highway. He saw the Nissan swoop across 3 lanes. He saw the Nissan intentionally lock its brakes for no reason. He saw Maya hold her lane and brake in a straight line. The officer climbed down. He walked over to the 4 people sitting on the bumpers of the ambulances, clutching their necks. "Miracle of miracles, folks," the officer said loudly. "The truck has a dash cam. Your little stunt is on video in 4K resolution. So, you can all stand up right now, and I'll arrest you for reckless driving and insurance fraud. Or you can keep rubbing your necks, and I'll add felony extortion to the charges." All 4 of them stopped wailing. They stood up, looking perfectly healthy, and stared at the ground. Here is what you learn from Maya. First, never swerve. In a panic-braking situation, you hold your lane. You brake in a straight line. If you have to hit the vehicle that cut you off, you hit them square. It sounds cold, it sounds brutal, but it is the only way to prevent a multi-fatality rollover. You are driving a train without tracks. You do not have the agility to dodge. Second, buy a dashcam. Buy it today. Do not start your engine without one. Out here, in the daylight, your word against a family of 4 in a crushed sedan is worth absolutely nothing to a jury. The video is your only shield against the swarm. The invisible hand. We've talked about the people on the road. Now I want to talk about the road itself, or rather, the sky above it. During the night, bad weather is obvious. Snow, rain, fog, you can see it in your headlights. But during the day, the sky can look perfectly blue, the sun can be shining, and the air itself can try to kill you. I'm talking about the wind, and specifically, the crosswind. Let me tell you about Julian Vance and the bridge that tried to throw him away. Julian was hauling empty. He had just dropped a load of appliances in New Jersey and was dead-heading back south, pulling a 5 3-foot dry van trailer with nothing inside it but air. When your trailer is fully loaded with 40,000 pounds, it is planted. Gravity is your friend. But when your trailer is empty, it is basically a massive aluminum sail. It weighs almost nothing, but it has over 500 square feet of surface area on the side. Julian was crossing the Delaware Memorial Bridge. It's a massive twin suspension bridge connecting New Jersey to Delaware. You are driving hundreds of feet in the air, completely exposed to the elements. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was blue. There were a few puffy white clouds. The weather report said, breezy. Julian was in the right lane, doing 50 miles an hour. What the weather report didn't say was that a pressure front was moving down the river channel. It wasn't a sustained wind. It was a microburst, a sudden, violent punch of air that funnels through the bridge towers like water through a fire hose. Julian didn't see it coming. You can't see the wind. He just felt the sudden, terrifying sensation of his steering wheel going completely light in his hands. A 70-mile-an-hour gust of wind hit the broad side of his empty trailer. If you have never felt a rig lift, I cannot adequately describe the horror of it. Julian looked in his right side mirror and saw daylight under his trailer tires. The wind had literally picked the passenger side of his trailer off the pavement. The trailer was tilting, leaning hard to the left, threatening to rip the fifth wheel off the tractor and drag the entire cab over the concrete barrier and down into the Delaware River. Now, human instinct in a panic is always the same: hit the brakes. If Julian had touched his brakes, he would be dead. When you hit the brakes, the weight of the vehicle transfers to the front. The nose dives, and the rear of the trailer gets even lighter. If he braked, the wind would have flipped the trailer like a toy. Julian remembered the physics of the machine. To save a leaning trailer, you don't slow it down, you pull it tight. Julian took his foot off the brake. He gripped the steering wheel, turning slightly into the wind to keep the tractor straight, and he mashed the accelerator to the floor. The diesel engine roared. The tractor surged forward. By accelerating, Julian created tension. He forced the tractor to pull hard against the trailer pin, stretching the rig out, shifting the momentum forward instead of sideways. It is the exact same physics as flying a kite. If the kite is wobbling and falling, you pull the string tight to stabilize it. The trailer slammed back down onto the pavement with a bone-jarring crash. The tires screamed against the asphalt. Julian kept his foot on the gas, fighting the steering wheel, pulling the rig through the invisible wall of wind until he cleared the bridge towers and hit the descending ramp, sheltered by the tree line. He pulled over on the shoulder, put his head against the steering wheel, and dry heaved. Here is the lesson of the daytime sky. You do not just look at the road, you look at the environment. Watch the trees. Watch the flags at the car dealerships. Watch the tall grass. If you see them whipping and you are pulling an empty trailer, a sail, you do not cross a major bridge. You do not drive across the open plains of Wyoming or the deserts of California. You pull over. You park your rig so that the nose of the tractor is facing directly into the wind, cutting through it, rather than letting the wind hit the broad side of the trailer. And you wait. Your dispatcher will scream at you. They will tell you it's a beautiful day, that the sun is shining, that you are losing time. You tell them, the wind is blowing 50. I am empty. I am parked. You are the captain of the ship. You are the one who feels the wheels lift. Never let a voice on a phone sitting in a quiet office tell you what the sky is doing to your truck. The end of the line. Drink the rest of your coffee. It's getting cold. Look out that diner window. The lot is full. The four-wheelers are swarming the gas pumps. The day shift is in full swing. You see them out there? The families, the businessmen, the commuters. They are driving around in their little metal bubbles, totally oblivious to the physics and the monsters that share the road with them. They don't know about the clipboards, the swarms, the wind, the traps, or the sheer, terrifying weight of the world we manage every single day. They don't have to know, because we know. That is the burden of the keys in your pocket. You don't get to be oblivious anymore. You are a professional. You know the night, and now you know the day. You know that danger doesn't care if the sun is shining. You keep your dashcam running. You hold your lane. You verify the signature. You feel the wind. You trust that cold voice in your gut, whether it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. I've given you everything I have. The logbook is full. I told you last night that I was retiring, and this time, I mean it. I'm paying this tab. I'm walking out to my rig. I'm dropping my last load, and I am going home. The seat across from you is going to be empty from now on. But you aren't alone. You've got the stories now. You've got the ghosts of every driver who learned these lessons the hard way riding shotgun with you. When you get out there today, into the heat and the glare and the noise, you remember the brotherhood. You keep your eyes moving. You be the professional that the road demands. Stand up, driver. Straighten your back. Take the keys. Go start your engine. Drive safe out there in the light. And I'll see you. Well, I won't see you down the road anymore. But the road is yours now. Make us proud. You thought I was gone, didn't you? You sat in the driver's seat. You adjusted the air ride suspension, checked your mirrors, and listened to the big diesel idle. You reached into the glove box to grab your logbook binder, and your fingers brushed against something hard, a little digital voice recorder. Wrapped in a piece of blue painter's tape with one word written on it in my terrible handwriting, play. You pressed the button, and here I am. I know what I said in the diner. I said my shift was over. I said the road was yours. And it is. I am sitting on my porch in Georgia right now, watching the sun come up over the pine trees, and I don't have a single key in my pocket. But old habits die hard, kid. When I walked out to my rig for the last time, I realized there were a few things I couldn't say while looking you in the eye. Some things are too heavy for a diner counter. Some things you can only listen to when you are completely, utterly alone in the cab, with the doors locked and the dashboard glowing in the dark. These aren't stories about traps or thieves or bad weather. We covered the survival manual, This tape is about the soul of the job. It's about the things that defy logic, the grace hidden in hard places, and the sheer, crushing weight of the solitude. Keep your eyes on the road. Just let my voice ride shotgun one last time. Let me tell you about a man named Kalen and the voice on a dead wire. The phantom call. I told you early on that I don't do ghosts. I deal in the real world, the asphalt, the steel, the bad men in the ditch. But out here, if you drive long enough, you are going to encounter things that the rational part of your brain cannot explain. You can call it instinct, you can call it a guardian angel, or you can call it a hallucination. It doesn't matter what you name it, as long as you listen to it. Kalen was running a load of timber down a winding, 2-lane state route in the Ozarks. It was 3 a.m. and it was pouring rain. The kind of rain that makes your wipers useless, turning the windshield into a waterfall. Kalen's CB radio had died 2 days prior. The internal fuse blew, and the unit was completely dark. Dead plastic. He was creeping along at 35 miles an hour, navigating the hairpin turns through the mountains, relying entirely on his high beams to cut through the deluge. The road ahead curved sharply to the right and crossed an old, concrete, pyloned bridge over a mountain river. As Kalen approached the curve, a voice came out of the speaker of his dead CB radio. It wasn't static. It wasn't a faint whisper. It was a clear, calm, impossibly loud voice. "Stop the truck, Kalen." Kalen froze. He looked at the CB. The power light was off. The screen was black. "Stop the truck right now." Kalen didn't think. He didn't rationalize. He stood on the brake pedal. The air brakes hissed violently, the trailer anti-lock system chattered, and the heavy load of timber groaned against the headache rack. The rig skidded on the wet pavement, sliding forward toward the curve, before finally shuddering to a halt. Kalen sat there, his chest heaving, staring at the dead radio. He waited for another message. Nothing. He grabbed his flashlight, popped the door, and stepped out into the freezing rain. He walked up to the curve, his boots splashing in the deep puddles, and shined his beam around the bend. The bridge was gone. The mountain river had flash flooded. The sheer force of the water and debris had completely washed out the center span of the bridge. Where the asphalt should have been, there was only a churning, violent black torrent of water, 50 feet down. If Kalen had taken that curve at 35 miles an hour, his 80,000-pound rig would have launched directly into the abyss. He would have been crushed, drowned, and buried under his own timber before anyone even knew he was missing. How did a dead radio speak? An engineer will tell you that unshielded speaker wires can occasionally pick up a strong localized ham radio signal. A psychologist will tell you that Kalen's subconscious mind heard the roar of the flooded river over the sound of his engine and manifested the voice as a survival mechanism. I don't care which one is true. Here is what you need to know. The road strips you down. When you spend thousands of hours alone, staring at the lines, your mind taps into a frequency that normal people don't have access to. Your intuition becomes a physical sense, as real as your eyesight. When the hair on your arm stands up, when a sudden, inexplicable dread washes over you, or when a voice in your own head tells you to drop the anchor, you do not ask for a logical explanation. You brake. You stop. You check. Logic is a luxury for people sitting safely in offices. Out here, you trust the phantom. It is the oldest safety equipment you have, the grace of the badge. Let's talk about the law. I taught you to be wary of fake cops and to protect yourself at checkpoints. I taught you that the dot is strict and that your logbook is a legal document you do not mess with. Drivers view the state troopers and the dot as the enemy, the wolves in the cruisers. But I want you to remember that underneath the badge, the Kevlar, and the mirrored sunglasses, there is a human being. And sometimes, when the world is completely falling apart, the law is the only friend you have. Let me tell you about Hector Salinas and the race against the clock. Hector was out in West Texas, 400 miles from home. He was pulling a refrigerated trailer loaded with beef. He was heavy, right at the 80,000-pound legal limit. And worse, his electronic logging device, ELD, showed he had exactly 30 minutes of drive time left before he was legally required to shut down for a 10-hour break. His phone rang. It was his neighbor. Hector's wife, who was 7 months pregnant, had collapsed. She was hemorrhaging. The ambulance had taken her to the hospital, and the doctors were rushing her into emergency surgery. The neighbor was crying, telling Hector that he needed to get home immediately. Hector hung up the phone. He had 30 minutes of legal drive time and a 6-hour drive ahead of him. If he stopped to drop his trailer, it would take hours he didn't have. If he drove over his hours, the ELD would flag him in the system. If he got caught driving out of hours in a fully loaded truck, he would be heavily fined, his truck would be impounded, and he could lose his CDL forever. Hector didn't care. He put the truck in gear, aimed it east, and dropped the hammer. He drove for 4 hours. His ELD was flashing red, screaming at him that he was in violation. He was doing 80 miles an hour in a 70 zone. He was a rolling felony. Just outside of San Antonio, the inevitable happened. A Texas Highway Patrol cruiser sitting in the center median hit its lights. Red and blue filled Hector's mirrors. Hector's heart broke. He pulled the massive rig onto the shoulder, threw it in park, and put his head on the steering wheel. He began to weep. The crushing weight of the fines, the loss of his career, and the terror of losing his wife all hit him at once. The trooper walked up to the window. He was an older guy, hard face, no nonsense. License, registration, and logbook. Driver, the trooper said. You were doing 82 in a 70, and my scanner shows your ELD is flashing a severe hours of service violation. Step out of the truck. Hector stepped down. Tears were streaming down his face. Officer, Hector choked out, handing over his CDL. I know I am in violation. I know I am speeding. You can arrest me. You can take my license. But please, my wife is in surgery at St. Luke's in Houston. She's losing the baby. Please just let me call the hospital. The trooper stopped writing on his clipboard. He looked at Hector. He looked at the sheer, raw devastation on the man's face. A cop knows the difference between a driver making an excuse and a man whose soul is being torn apart. The trooper looked at his watch. Houston was still 2 hours away. The trooper handed Hector his CDL back. Get back in your truck, Hector, the trooper said softly. Hector stared at him, confused. Sir? I said, get back in your truck. Turn your CB to channel 19. When I pull out, you stay exactly 3 car lengths behind my bumper. Do not pass me, and do not fall behind. Hector climbed into his cab. The trooper got into his cruiser, turned on his light bar and his sirens, and pulled out onto the interstate. For the next 2 hours, that Texas state trooper ran interference for an overweight, out-of-hours commercial truck. The cruiser cleared the left lane, pushing traffic out of the way, allowing Hector to run at 85 miles an hour straight through the heart of the state. When they reached the county line, another cruiser was waiting. The first trooper had radioed ahead. The second cruiser took over the escort. They handed Hector off, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, all the way to the city limits of Houston. Hector made it to the hospital. He was there when his wife woke up. They saved her, and they saved the baby. Hector never got a ticket. He never got a violation. The troopers logged it as a medical emergency escort. So here is the lesson. Respect the law, fear the fines, and keep your logbook clean. But if the day ever comes when the worst happens, and you are backed into a corner where you have to choose between your family and your CDL, you do what you have to do. And when the red and blue lights pull you over, do not lie. Do not run. You look that officer in the eye. You treat them with absolute respect, and you tell them the terrifying truth. Sometimes the badge is heavy, but the heart underneath it is stronger. The white line fever. I need to warn you about the disease. You think the biggest threat to your life is a patch of black ice or a blown steer tire. It isn't. The biggest threat to your life is the sheer, uncompromising scale of the North American continent. When you drive across West Texas, or Nevada, or the plains of Saskatchewan, the road stops being a road. It becomes a treadmill. You can drive for 6 hours, and the scenery does not change. The dashed white lines rhythmically passing under your hood thwack, 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 act like a metronome. The vibration of the diesel engine acts like a weighted blanket. This creates a state of severe dissociation. We call it white line fever. But I'm not talking about just getting a little sleepy. I am talking about the erasure of the self. Let me tell you about Marcus, and the day he forgot his own name. Marcus was a team driver, but his partner was asleep in the bunk. Marcus was driving I-80 through Nebraska. It is hundreds of miles of utterly flat, featureless cornfields. The road is straight as an arrow. Marcus had been driving for 7 hours. He was staring at the horizon. Suddenly, Marcus blinked, and a wave of absolute, freezing terror washed over him. He was gripping a steering wheel. He was looking at a dashboard. He was moving at 70 miles an hour, but he didn't know how to drive. He didn't know what the pedals did. He didn't know what the gauges meant. Worse, he didn't know who he was. He couldn't remember his name. He couldn't remember where he was going. His brain had completely detached from his reality due to the extreme sensory deprivation of the endless, unchanging road. He was a blank slate, sitting at the helm of an 80,000-pound missile. Panic seized him. His heart rate spiked to 160 beats a minute. He wanted to scream, but he didn't know who he would be calling for. His foot hovered over the pedals, terrified to press anything because he didn't know what they did. This is the peak of highway dissociation. The brain, bored out of its mind by the lack of stimuli, essentially puts itself into standby mode, and sometimes it forgets how to wake up. Marcus survived because of muscle memory. His conscious mind was blank, but his body had done this 10,000 times. His right foot gently eased off the accelerator. His hands guided the wheel to the right. He let the truck coast onto the rumble strips, the violent shaking jarring his nervous system until the truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder. Marcus threw the parking brakes, pure reflex. He sat there, hyperventilating. He looked around the cab. He saw a wallet sitting on the console. He opened it. He pulled out a driver's license. He read it out loud. Marcus Vance. He said it again. My name is Marcus Vance. He looked at the manifest on the passenger seat. I am in Nebraska. I am driving a truck. It took 20 minutes of reading his own documents out loud, touching the physical objects in the cab, and splashing ice water on his face for his identity to fully boot back up in his brain. Do not underestimate the void, kid. The road will eat you alive if you let it. It will hypnotize you, numb you, and erase you. You have to tether yourself to the earth. If you are driving the long, empty miles, you do not just sit in silence. You chew ice. You roll the window down and let the freezing wind hit your face. You call a friend, and you talk about the mundane details of their life. You listen to a complicated audiobook. You read the road signs out loud. Exit 45. Gas and food. Say it. Speak it into the cab. Keep your brain engaged. You are the captain. If you abandon the helm, the void will gladly take the wheel. The final escort. All right, this is the last one. We've talked a lot about survival, about getting home to your family, but the hard truth of this life is that not everyone gets to go home. The road is brutal on the body. The food, the sitting, the stress. Sometimes the heart just gives out. Sometimes a driver pulls the curtains closed in the sleeper berth for their 10-hour break, and they don't open them again in the morning. When a civilian dies, it's a tragedy, but it's localized. When a truck driver dies in the cab, 1,000 miles from home, it is a logistical nightmare. The company has to fly a recovery driver out to get the freight. The police have to process the scene. The body is in a morgue, in a state where they don't know a single soul. It is the loneliest way to leave this earth. But out here, we do not let our own go home alone. Let me tell you about Big John and the missing man formation. Big John was a legend in the heavy haul community. He moved oversized loads, wind turbine blades, massive transformers. He had a heart attack at a truck stop in Ohio, passed away in his sleeper. His wife was back in Tennessee, completely devastated, with no way to afford to bring him home, let alone bring his beloved truck back. The trucking company was just going to hire a tow service to drag the truck back to the terminal and have a funeral home handle the remains. Cold, clinical. The CB radio had other plans. Word spread through the channels. Big John was gone. He was stranded in Ohio. A group of independent owner-operators, men who had run with John for 20 years, decided that wasn't how the story was going to end. They coordinated with the family and the funeral home. They got permission from the state. They loaded John's casket not into a hearse, but onto the deck of a polished, flatbed trailer. They strapped it down with pristine chains and draped an American flag over it. On a Tuesday morning, the flatbed pulled out of the funeral home in Ohio, heading south for Tennessee. It did not go alone. I was there. I saw it. When that flatbed hit Interstate 75, there were 10 trucks waiting on the on-ramp to fall in behind it. 10 miles down the road, 5 more trucks merged in. At the state line, there were 20. By the time the convoy reached Kentucky, there were 50 fully loaded tractor-trailers, bobtails, tankers, and flatbeds, all running in a single, unbroken line, miles long. Every single truck had its headlights on. Every single truck had its amber hazard lights flashing. The CB radio, usually a chaotic mess of arguments and chatter, was dead silent. We ran on Channel 19, and for 400 miles, nobody spoke a word. The silence was heavier than the freight. The state police didn't try to break it up. The troopers saw the flatbed, saw the flashing lights, and they pulled ahead of the convoy, blocking the on-ramps, running a rolling escort for 50 commercial trucks through 3 different states. When we reached the cemetery in Tennessee, the flatbed pulled in. The rest of the 50 trucks lined the 2-lane country road outside the gates, parking on the shoulders, shutting down their engines. 50 drivers climbed out of their cabs, men and women, covered in grease, wearing flannel and boots. We stood on the running boards of our trucks, taking off our hats, and we watched Big John go into the ground. When the service was over, the lead driver, John's best friend, walked back to his rig. He climbed in. He didn't start the engine. He just reached up and pulled the air horn lanyard. One long, mournful blast echoing across the hills. Then the truck behind him blew its horn, then the next, and the next. 50 air horns, sounding a thunderous, deafening salute that shook the leaves off the trees. A 2-1 gun salute in diesel and compressed air. Then we started our engines, put them in gear, and dispersed back to the interstates, back to the grind, back to the solitude. This is what I want you to remember when the night is dark, when the dispatcher is screaming at you, when the four-wheelers are cutting you off, and when you feel like you are entirely alone in the world. You are not alone. You are part of the brotherhood of the long white line. It is a flawed, rough, beautiful family. We fight, we argue, and we compete. But when the chips are down, when the blizzard hits, when the trap is sprung, or when one of us falls, we throw the net. We build the wall, and we bring our brothers home. The tape is spinning down, kid. The battery is almost dead, and I am out of stories. I gave you the survival guide in the diner. I gave you the soul of the job right here. You hold both of them now. Look out the windshield. The road is waiting. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you haul. It only demands respect. Give it the respect it deserves, and it will give you a life unlike any other on earth. Do me a favor. When this tape clicks off, I want you to roll down your window. I want you to listen to the sound of that engine. I want you to take a deep breath of that diesel air. Then, I want you to take this little digital recorder, and I want you to toss it in the trash can at the fuel island. You don't need my voice in your head anymore. You need your own. Trust your gut. Keep your doors locked. Be the eyes of the night. Be the wall for the helpless. Put it in gear, driver. Release the brakes, and I'll see you somewhere on down the road.